sending out his messengers saying there's going to be a change coming. There's going to be something that's going to happen that you've got to look forward to. He raised up Daniel. When you read the book of Daniel, from this Jewish boy who was taken captive to being basically second in command of the entire Babylonian Empire. And Daniel, in God's through the anointing of the Holy Spirit, would prophesy, and he'd begin to teach these learned men from Babylon, from all different cultures that were gathered there in the capital city of the empire, and he would begin to tell them the prophecies of the coming Messiah. He began to teach them the signs to look for that the Messiah was coming. Where do you think the wise men came from that came and visited Jesus? Most scholars believe they were people who had been learned, who had been taught, who had read Daniel's prophecies. And so that when the time came, they knew this is what has been called for. And it's amazing to me, again, when you look at history, not just what happened in the Bible, but there's two different historians, one named Suetonius, who was a Latin historian, and one named Tacitus, who was a Roman historian. Both wrote history of the world in about the first century AD, the 30 years after Jesus had lived. And both of them, Suetonius especially, this is a quote from his writing. He records that a firm persuasion had long prevailed in the East that it was fated for the empire of the world at that time to devolve on someone who should go forth from Judea. So this Latin writer from Greece, from Italy, somewhere during that time says, it's well known that the people of the East, who are the people of the East? The Persians, the Babylonians, the Medes, the Israelites, everybody to the east of Rome had a firm persuasion. They understood one person who came from Judea. What's Judea? It's Israel. It's Jerusalem. Jerusalem was in the Roman province of Judea. And so this secular historian, two of them both mention this, say, yeah, people from the east for a long time have been looking that at this time there would come somebody from Judea who's going to impact the kingdoms of the world. They knew and they understood something was going to happen. There's another instance of a man named Schlegel who was in, I believe, like the 1800s. He was a German historian who studied extensively the countries and the history of India and China and their interrelationship and what they did. And Schlegel says that Buddhist missionaries traveling to China met Chinese sages going west to seek the Messiah about 33 AD. Isn't that amazing? That those prophecies, those things, because of how God had used Israel and had worked and used and separated them and then integrated them and used the prophets, those prophecies had even reached China, that men were coming to look for the Messiah at the fullness of time, when just the right time had come and Jesus had been born here on earth. God had used history. God used Israel and the prophets to raise an expectation that a Messiah, a chosen one, was coming into the world from the land of the Jews at this specific time. It's not an accident. It's not something that can be explained any other way than the hand of God upon the world and upon Israel. So let's look at not just Israel. See, God's not just the God of Israel. He's the God of the entire world. God's not just the God of the Jewish people. He is the creator and master. He's the master of the universe. There's an old one for you. You guys thought it was He-Man. God is the God of the entire world. In fact, there's a story in Daniel chapter 2. I don't have the verses up here, but the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, has a dream. And he wakes up one morning and he's agitated, he's bothered. He's like, I had a dream and I woke up in a bad mood. I don't even remember what the dream is, but I need somebody to tell me what the dream was and then interpret what it means. And so he goes to all of his magi, his wise men, his magicians, the people who are supposed to do that sort of thing. And he's like, I woke up in a bad mood because I had a bad dream. I don't remember it. You guys tell me what the dream was and what it means. And they're all like, what? We can't do that. That's impossible. There's no way. You have to at least tell us the dream so we can interpret it. He's like, no, if you're really so wise and you're so connected to the gods, you should be able to tell me what the dream was. And they're like, you're crazy. We can't do that. Nebuchadnezzar goes, fine, I'm just going to kill all of you then. That's a bad mood. Like, how many of you guys have ever woken up from a bad dream and been mad at your spouse for something they did in your imagination? Like, I'm mad at you. Why? Well, because I thought you did something bad. Okay, this was even worse than that. This is the most powerful man in the world, wakes up in a bad mood. They can't tell him what the dream is, so he's just going to kill them all. And so there's soldiers sent to Daniel, who was one of the counselors of the king, and they come into Daniel's house, and they're like, okay, Daniel, get your stuff in order. We're going to have to kill you now. Daniel's like, whoa, what? What is going on? So they tell him, Nebuchadnezzar had a bad dream. Nobody can tell him what it was or what it means. And so he's ordered the death of all of the counselors, all of the wise men. And Daniel's like, give me a minute. Let me pray. Go to the king and tell him I'm going to pray and just give me like 24 hours. And so he goes to his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he says, let's pray, guys. This is what's going on. Our lives depend on it. Pray like your lives depend on it, because they do. Maybe God will give us the dream and the interpretation. And that's exactly what God does in Daniel chapter 2. Daniel comes to the king and he says, in your vision, your majesty, you saw standing before you a huge shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. The head of the statue was made of fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. As you watched, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. Then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. This dream, and what Daniel goes on to interpret it to mean, he says to Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold. That's a great place to start if you have somebody who's threatening to kill you. A little flattery is not a bad thing in that instance. But he says to Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold. You're this great king, the leader of the amazing Babylon Empire. But after the Babylon Empire falls, there's going to be another kingdom, the chest and arms of silver. And then after that one falls, there's going to be the abdomen and thighs of iron, another kingdom. And after that, there's going to be another kingdom that's represented by the feet of iron and clay mixed together. The amazing thing is that when you read through history, what you see is you have the Babylonian Empire, you have the Persian Empire, you have the Greek Empire, you have the Roman Empire. What happened during the time of the Roman Empire? Jesus, the rock of ages, came and smashed the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire eventually fell. But what happened? Christendom took its place. Christianity, the church, rose up and covered the whole earth. And so God is saying in that moment to Nebuchadnezzar through Daniel, I'm not just the God of the Israelites. I'm the one who commands kings and kingdoms to rise up and determines when they're going to fall. I'm the one who orchestrates all of history in the world. It's not just biblical history, it's secular history that I'm in charge of. It's the entire world. And it's amazing when you read through, especially the prophet Daniel and Isaiah, there's so many prophecies, and they are so right on the money with what happened that people who look at it from outside are like, there's no way these books were written before these events took place. They're too accurate. They're too perfect. The prophecies are too on point. But we know, man, that's God. God is saying, no, this is what's going to happen, and then he makes it happen. God used each ancient world power to accomplish his goal of setting the stage for his arrival. Going back to even before the Babylonians, you go back to the Egyptians. God used the land of Egypt for his people to grow. And yes, it was slavery and it was awful and it was hard, but God used the Egyptians to protect the Israelites. They went from a family of 12 brothers to a nation of, most historians believe, 2 million people. There's no way that would have happened if they would have been living just out in the wild in the land of Canaan on their own. Somebody would have come and destroyed them. But because God brought them in under the most powerful nation in the world, yes, they had to deal with slavery and they had to deal with all of the things that went through that, but God used that time to grow them. Come on, there's a whole sermon right there. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter how hard it is. It doesn't matter whether you think it's good or not. God can use that time and those circumstances to grow you into the person he wants you to be. Yeah. That's what he did with the Egyptians, and it wasn't just happenstance. God told Abraham exactly what was going to happen in Genesis chapter 15. It says, then the Lord said to Abram, you can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. You guys know what happened when the Jews left Egypt? The 10 plagues, you've heard this story of how these 10 plagues, when the Jews finally left, when Pharaoh finally let them go, the Egyptian people were so happy that the Israelites were leaving, that the Jews were leaving. They just poured on them treasures, gold, jewels, and all sorts of jewelry, all sorts of things, and said, take it, just get out of here. And so the Jewish people plundered the kingdom of Egypt on their way out. God, 400 years before it ever happened, told Abraham exactly what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, and how they were going to be leaving. That's God and how he does it. So he used Egypt to do that. He used Assyria and Babylon to take the Jewish people and their beliefs and messages about a coming Messiah to the world. Assyria and Babylon come in at different times, and Assyria comes in and attacks the northern kingdom of Israel and takes them off. And then a couple hundred years later, Babylon comes in and attacks Jerusalem and destroys them and takes them off into the world. But listen to what Moses said by the inspiration of God in Deuteronomy chapter 28, some 600 years before either one of those events took place. For the Lord will scatter you among all the nations from one end of the earth to the other. God knew. God knew what was going to happen. God knew why it needed to happen. God knew who was going to do it. God knew where each and every Jew was going to end up. And God said, not only is this what's going to happen, I'm the one who's making it happen. I'm the one who's raising up the Assyrians. I'm the one who's raising up the Babylonians to do these things. Well, what about the Greeks? The Bible doesn't say anything about the Greeks. Before the Greeks rose, Malachi was done. That was the last book of prophets to be written. And so what about the Greeks? Man, God used Alexander the Great to spread the Greek language throughout the known world so that the gospel could be preached in a common tongue. Alexander the Great, the greatest conqueror in probably all of humanity, took the people of the Greek people and the Greek language, took over so much land, and he spread the Greek language throughout everywhere he went. Isaiah chapter 28, verse 11, this is what God says. So now God will have to speak to his people through foreign oppressors who speak a strange language. God knew. It wasn't going to be the Hebrew language that was going to be spoken throughout the whole world. It was the Greek language. It was the language of their oppressors. That was the language that Jesus spoke. That was the language that the Gospels were written in. That's the language that Paul spoke and wrote his letters in, because everybody understood that language. And hundreds of years before it ever happened, God said, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to give you the good news of my son's birth through a foreign language. Man, God also used the Romans to bring order and peace and ease of travel so that the Gospels could easily and safely be spread. You study history, there's a time of period of about 400 years called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. The Roman Empire, from about 40 years before Jesus was born to about 400 years after he died, there was this amazing peace throughout the entire known world at that time, brought about by the Romans. When you read the Gospels, and so often you see where they'll mention, hey, there was a Roman centurion, there was a Roman soldier, there was a guard. It's because the Romans left soldiers everywhere they went to keep the peace. And you study history, and it talks about the legions of Rome and how each legion had a specific area that they were in charge of. God used the Romans to provide this time of peace and order so that his gospel could be spread. He used the Romans. You can still go to Europe and the Middle East and Africa and see the Roman roads. It's amazing. It's a marvel at how well they were designed and built, that they're still there today. You can still walk on them. And God used that and used their ingenuity and used their knowledge and used their army to provide a safe space and an ease of travel for the gospel to be spread around the world. You know, God says that's exactly what he's going to do. In Isaiah chapter 66, verse 19, he says, I will perform a sign among them, and I will send those who survive to be messengers to the nations, to Tarshish, to the Libyans and Lydians who are famous as archers, to Tubal in Greece, and to all the lands beyond the sea that have not heard of my fame or seen my glory. There they will decree my glory to the nations. God used Rome and all of its might and all of its power and all of its pride to accomplish his will, so that in the fullness of time, when the exact right time had come, he sent his son into the world. God isn't just the God of Israel. He's not just the God of the Bible. He's the God of the whole earth. He's the God of all history. He's all powerful. He's omnipowerful. He's omnipresent. He's omniscient. He's all knowing. He set these kingdoms into motion. And he said, for a while, Nebuchadnezzar, you're going to be powerful. For a while, Darius, you're going to be powerful. For a while, it's going to be Alexander. For a while, it's going to be Caesar. It's going to be this one. And he said, this is what you're going to do, and this is why you're going to do it, so that when the fullness of time had come, my son is going to be born here on earth. If God has done all of this, he foretold the rise and fall of kingdoms and then made it happen. He prepared Israel and the world for his arrival. He brought about a common language and a great time of peace for his gospel to be more easily spread. Is there anything that is too big for him to handle? There's nothing. The most powerful countries and rulers of history are just mere pawns in the hands of God. He brings them up and sets the time. As big as God is and as powerful as history shows him to be, the amazing thing about the gospel, the amazing thing about this season that we're celebrating, is God is also personal. He said, I'm not going to hide behind temple walls. I'm not going to separate myself anymore by all of these rules and regulations and sacrifices and priests and all of these things that you have to go through to get to me. I am going to come to you. And so he was born in a manger, and he was called Emmanuel, God with us. God is not just the master and creator of the entire universe. He is a personal God that knows and longs to have a relationship with each one of us. And the Bible declares this as well in Isaiah 43, verse 1. It says, the one who formed you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. The one who formed you, the one who created you, the one who made all of these amazing things happen says, you are mine. He calls you by name because he knows you, because he's right there with you. He is God with us. And it's so amazing to me that this all-powerful, all-knowing God knows me, wants to be with me. And so I can call on him. Here's the next thing that I love in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 1. The Lord says, I was ready to respond, but no one asked for help. I was ready to be found, but no one was looking for me. I said, here I am to a nation that did not call on my name. God's here. God's waiting for you. He's right here, ready to be found by you. He's right here, willing, ready to answer your call. He's even over here, like waving, I'm here, over here, I'm right here. All you have to do is look. All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is come to him and he will respond. He will answer. That's the beauty of the gospel. That's the good news. That even though he does all of these amazing things and he raises up kingdoms and he makes them fall, and even though he adjusts and makes all of this stuff happen, he's right here. And so we can go confidently to God. We can enter into his presence and lay it down at the altar, and it doesn't matter what it is. There's nothing too big for our God. There's nothing that is impossible for him. Even though I may think it's impossible, it is easy for you. And so this morning, whatever it is that you're dealing with, whatever it is that you're going through, I know we had an awesome time of prayer already, but I want to invite you as we sing this song again, if you'll stand with me, come and give it to God. He's right here. He's ready to respond if you'll just ask. He's ready to be found if you'll seek him. He's saying, here I am, here I am. Come and find him right now.
When I praise your name, my problems look small. 'Cause if it's your fight, this giant will fall. 10,000 battles, you win them all. When I praise your name, my problems look small. 'Cause when you say mountains move, they do. And when you speak to the sea, it breaks into, and what I call impossible is easy for you. What I call impossible is easy for you. My weapon is worship, and it's gonna win. The Lion of Judah is roaring again. The one who is for me is more than odds against. My weapon is worship, and it's gonna win. 'Cause when you say mountains move, they do. And when you speak to the sea, it breaks into, and what I call impossible What's a chain? What's a chain to a chain breaker? What's a stone? What's a stone to a stone roller? What's a grave?